Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from. Just going to give a couple of minutes for people to start coming in, and then we can go into it. Hello, good morning. So my name is Anu, and I am an account manager and e-learning specialist here at Kubicle. And today we're going to be talking about navigating the gap between data and technical literacy. Joined by me are Sinead Savnot from PwC Ireland. We're going to introduce Sinead a little bit more in detail later on as part of our agenda. And I'm also joined by CEO of Kubicle, Mark Henderson, who's going to talk a little bit about the effect of data literacy on the skills gap. So just to set the stage a little bit on what to expect from today. We're going to start with talking about the data economy, which is essentially the digital ecosystem that helps creating economic value. Going into that, we're going to ask people what they think and how that's impacting the skills landscape or the need for different digital skills within the corporate environment and also from a macroeconomic environment. Following that, we're going to talk about a very important stakeholder group for us here at Kubicle, which is the role of finance in that changing landscape as well. And then finally, how we can respond to this gap or this absolute need for data literacy by building a robust digital upskilling strategy, where I will be joined by Sinead, and we'll talk about a little bit of her experience within PwC Ireland in doing that. So just to get us started a little bit, and of course, the buzzword for the day or for the next few days or years to come is AI. So you'll see a few mid-journey images throughout the course of the presentation. Because we're talking about data literacy, it's only fair to start with just data, right? And there is a lot of data. We hear things like data is the new oil and all things data, but how much data really is there in the world? Projected to be 175, a whooping 175 zettabytes by 2025. For perspective, a zettabyte is equal to 10 to the power 21 bytes. And just to contextualize that a bit further, Google's former CEO, Eric Schmidt, said kind of around in 2003, when Google was indexing all of this data, is how much data was created from the start of civilization to 2003 was 0.5% of a zettabyte. So if you can imagine that until 2003 and now to 2025, just to give you a scale of how much data is being created every day and has been perhaps for the last 10 years, is insane. And of course, if you were to stack that and visualize that through Midjourney, you can see that it's enough DVDs to stack around the world about 222 times. And if you tried to download that with your average internet speed, it would take you 1.8 billion years to download. So needless to say, you cannot hide from the data economy anymore, right? There's almost so much data available for everyone, businesses, individuals, teams to make use of, and participation is imperative more than ever within an organization. So interestingly, to look at this insight survey done by MIT, where people asked business leaders, what impact have they noticed within their organization since they've started doing more data-driven decision-making? There's been improved collaboration with partners. People are seeing longer and faster innovation cycles. With the increase of customer centricity, acquisition and retention has improved. And the interesting one is, of course, increased revenue. And we're going to talk a lot about that over the course of the next few minutes, which is the positive correlation between data literacy and enterprise value or profit margins or cost of sales and all of the other things that stack up to be revenue within an organization. So not just from a micro perspective, of course, it's important within an organization. It's also very important to view this from a macroeconomic or almost a national level for different countries. So maybe to pick a country which is at the forefront of data literacy scores is the UK. And the UK government has put together a very robust NDS, or a data strategy, in place. And it talks about how it is becoming more and more important for everybody to have at least a basic level of data literacy to really operate and be successful in today's environment, in today's work landscape. So when this survey was done, the NDS found that there was a whooping 250,000 open roles which had data skill dependencies. There were also 56% businesses that agreed that they need to build data skills within their business internally. To bring this back to a corporate, or to a company environment, again, of course, it is important, from a macro perspective. There are constantly three forces at play that kind of help organizations to do the data-informed decision-making framework better. And this is really different from 10, 15 years ago. 10, 15 years ago, organizations used to have a data scientist or a data analyst. And if you were in sales or if you were in HR, you would send this data to the data scientist and you would get these insights back. But that's changed now. What is starting to become important is almost self-serve analytics tools, data education, and in line with that, the rise of what we call low-code, no-code data analytics. You don't have to know, you don't have to be an engineer or a programmer to be able to wrangle or prepare or visualize your data anymore. People are trying to build that skill at a foundational level across the organization. And because of that, we're seeing almost continued investment, a corporate investment in data education or digital upskilling, with the formation of L&D roles, digital transformation roles, and data and analytics roles within companies as well. So this data decision-making framework is constantly at play, with all of these forces acting together to help both individuals and businesses achieve constant value. So coming to sort of a corporate hierarchy, and this is a really big part of our our value proposition and our perspective within Kubicle, is creating data citizens. Going away from the role of defining yourself as an analyst or a scientist, but whatever you're doing within an organization, how can you best be trained or best be adept to use the data that is available to you to make informed data-driven decisions? And normally people think, oh, you have to be in finance, or you have to be you have to be working on Excel basically to be adept with data. But you could be in HR, you could be in marketing, and you just need to be a data citizen, where you're making the most of these low-code, no-code tools, and transforming or making your daily tasks more efficient and optimized as possible. Of course, that doesn't remove the growth or even further enrichment of the middle layer, which is the centers of excellence, as you would see within at least the professional services sector, which I work closely with as a part of my role within the business, or even at the top of the apex, which is high code, which is your engineers, your programmers, and your data scientists. So within the hierarchy, we're seeing, of course, that data scientists and analysts still stay at the top of the pyramid, but this rise in kind of the bottom of the pyramid. And with this kind of an increased flow of top-down and bottom-up decision-making with the use of data. Now, with this kind of data literacy training, what are the positive impacts that have been noticed within organizations? This survey was done by DataCamp. I think it was back in 2021 or 22. And almost obviously notice the little pink lines that you can see, which is significant improvement in things like quality and speed of decision-making, again, in line with customer centricity, customer experience, employee retention, and reduction of costs, which is, again, reduction of cost of sales, increase in return on assets, on returns of equity, and in line with that increase in business revenue. This brings us, of course, not to only look at it from an employer's perspective, but also at an individual level, right? So what is the value for you as an individual to invest in yourself, to invest time in really building a digital literacy, a foundational digital literacy skill for yourself, is the data literacy premium. Now, this is a premium that organizations are willing to pay um, more to individuals that are more data literate. So you will find that if you're trained in the, in the Power BIs and the Alteryx and the UiPaths of the world, you will notice that there is a potential salary increase for you and a data literacy premium that organizations are willing to spend for these skills. And again, in line with that, you can notice it's significantly different in countries like Japan or Germany, UK. And this actually brings up the data literacy score into perspective as well. Um, Interestingly enough, Europe is a leader in data literacy indexed. So UK is kind of number one in terms of doing digital literacy well, followed by Germany at number two, and followed by France at number three. So you'll see that these premium kind of differences in salaries differ in countries where these skills might be even more short, like Japan and Australia. Now, the opportunity cost of not doing this, right? Coming back to a fun mid-journey prompt, you'll see the mid-journey prompt with all of the images that we've used in this presentation. What happens if you basically don't ride the spiral or don't get on the data literacy or digital transformation boat? You're basically going to head towards extinction, right? It's more and more important to stay relevant, and it's more and more important to transform or adapt yourself with the change in environment, because it started off with, the metaverse, VR, and it's going towards AI, and every day you feel like you wake up and you're listening about more tools and technologies. And a good way to kind of stay ahead of that is stay on top of them in at least a foundational way, if not in a detailed way, right? And if you don't, what happens is, again, what happened with Kodak, really, right? They thought that film photography is going to continue to be kind of the main future of photography. They didn't give the importance to digital photography that was done by competition or other players in the market. And Midjourney beautifully visualizes the slow downfall or the meltdown of Kodak in this image. So yeah, let's not lose our competitiveness and stay ahead of the same. And in line with that, the report that we've referred to before, done by Click in 2021, organizations that presented and were evaluated as a part of this study found that there was 5% more enterprise value than their peers. And when you break that down, it's interesting because it's metrics like reduced cost of sales, increased cost of return on assets, return on equity, and gross margins as well. So again, this is always an interesting one to tie back to ROI in L&D, right? One talks about return on investment in L&D in a big way, but I think it's time that we start giving that return on investment the value that it truly deserves with enterprise value or direct correlation to profits. Now, how is that difference of opinion seen within an organization, right? If you ask leaders or partners or a strategic leadership team within a business, everybody would say that, oh yeah, we're doing a really good job. We're democratizing access. We're making sure we're giving our people as much as data as possible. We're doing our best to give them all the digital training and all the tools and tech that they need. But if you actually ask the foot soldiers or the doers in an organization, there is a big gap. So you'll see, in the second bottom over there, that 60% leaders thought that they're giving their employees enough access to data, but only 7% of the actual employees agreed that that was happening. So it's really important to note of that schism in opinion, and maybe start asking your organization if they are getting, or in truly the sense of the digital literacy, access to not just data tools and technologies, but access to actual data as well. So decentralization of data from the strategic apex down to the bottom of the organization to assist with better decision making. And this brings us to a great skills revolution, which I'm going to hand over to Mark to talk about.
Excellent. Thank you so very much indeed, Anu. Great to be here and to speak about one of my great passions, of course, and that is data literacy. So what we're seeing is a great revolution of skills, right? The need for individuals to have and acquire skills which are ostensibly very different today from what perhaps they used to be that yesterday or years before, is a challenge that individuals and organizations are facing collectively. And a great way to put this message across or to substantiate this message is actually through a bit of research that Gartner did a number of years ago. And this research actually used some really formidable technology, the technology of web scraping, whereby a total of, I think, 30 million, or perhaps it was 13 million, sorry, if you look at N equals in the bottom there, 13 million job posts were scraped in 2017 for roles in IT, finance, sales in the US. And it was found in those ads that an average of 12.6 skills were required or asked for in those job ads in 2017. Looking at those same ads or similar ads in 2018, of those 12.6 skills, 11.5 of those same 12.6 skills were required in 2018 from the 2017 skills. However, 1.6 additional skills were required that weren't listed in the year previous. And if you look at that same trend year after year, and in this instance, some of those future years were projected based on the date in which the research was done, comparing 2017 to 2021, the projected numbers in 2021 makes for some really very interesting reading. And that is, of the 12.6 skills that were advertised for and needed in 2017, only 8.4 of those skills were still in demand several years later, but 10.1 new skills were required. And so when we talk about this necessity for upskilling and looking at data literacy and data skills, whilst a lot of these skills, covered other areas, a lion's share of those skills were actually in the data literacy space. So thinking about sort of critical thinking, data tools, and what have you. And so there's a serious skills year over year, and there's a significant requirement for individuals to be upskilled in a new set of skills. And that is something that we have seen quite significantly in the years of running our business, Kubicle. Now, in Kubicle, we deal with hundreds of large companies and several different stakeholders within those companies. But one area whereby we see a significant amount of change is specifically within the role of finance, and looking at some of the changes that we've seen perhaps in the last decade, and going back to Anu's third or fourth slide rather in her presentation around the forces at play within the organization, we're seeing the result of those forces really getting stronger. The likes of low-code and no-code tools being made available to the data citizenship population within a company, and at the same time, the need to invest in education to be able to fulfill the needs of those rising skills. And so where the finance professional perhaps of a decade ago, would be focused on things like scheduled insights, quarterly reports, monthly reports, a very set schedule of business intelligence shared with business stakeholders, we're now finding the necessity of real-time insights to provide individuals with access to financial data to be able to make immediate decisions that are fueled by the insights that are being made available. At the same time as well, whereby we once saw this kind of necessity of just the provision of reports, we're now actually finding the need for the CFO in particular to become this kind of chief value partner within the organization, whereby storytelling and facilitating individuals with more holistic financial information to be able to test hypotheses at a department level, but align that to the financial storytelling within the organization is something that we're also finding to become a sort of increasing requirement in the financial skill set. We're also seeing, while obviously it does still exist, but kind of the abolition of the center of excellence. Of course, there's still things that the general data citizen can't do and still need a center of excellence to do. But because of this increasing capability of self-service tools, we're finding that just simply the modern day finance individual can get a lot more done themselves. And of course, with the rise of automation, robotic process automation, for example, we're finding that a lot of those processes that used to be manual, of course, are now being facilitated through automation tooling. And so, you know, in the last 10, 15 years, we've really seen a significant shift in the capability of the average finance or finance professional. And this is actually very nicely mapped, in fact, in terms of the types of content that we invest in creating in our Kubicle training library. You know, circa a decade ago, we were focused on really Excel for everything. You know, that was the weapon of choice for all financial professionals, and pretty much to this day it still is. However, we're finding now that there is some speaking in the tooling set, for example, into Python for processing and data management, particularly with regards to data visualization using tools like Tableau and Power BI. We're also seeing a significant rise in tools for data workflow management, particularly the likes of Alteryx, robotic process automation through the likes of UiPath and Power Automate. And of course, no presentation today can go without the mention of ChatGPT or artificial intelligence. You know, we're finding that a lot of capabilities are being augmented by the rise of generative AI. And, you know, we've seen a really interesting sort of short to date short history of the way in which companies are incorporating this technology within their tooling set. But there's a pretty standard theme, and that theme is that the first step is to introduce a policy, which is don't use this thing because we don't necessarily know what the threats amount to and what the opportunities amount to. The second step is let's make sure we build a democratic understanding of how this tooling can play a part within our business future. And we're finding a lot of companies now in between sort of stage 2 and stage 3 of the implementation of this technology, and that is how do we actually go about building some standard processes and procedures that this tool and technology can play to build competitive differential within our organization. So a very interesting one that has come to rise very, very quickly, not just within your standard finance team, but I think within all organizations around the world. And so, you know, we sort of raised this question, which is data literacy, we believe, and lots of people we work with believe it is absolutely a priority. But for you, is it really a priority? And, you know, throughout the duration of this presentation, I think what we've done is kind of settle the arguments for where it builds competitive differential, where it builds competitive differential for the individual, not just the business, and, you know, how from a macroeconomic lens and a microeconomic lens, it's important for all individuals to compete accordingly. But I kind of like to bring this argument back to a very basic example, one that you may have seen before. But of course, definition of data literacy, the ability to read, understand, create, and communicate data as information. The image that you see in front of you here is of a World War II fighter plane, which has just returned from battle. The red marks on the chassis of the aircraft represent the sort of cluster of bullet holes, and therefore the areas that were most prone to enemy fire. The Allies sought to strengthen the most commonly damaged parts of the planes when they returned in the interest of reducing the number of aircraft that actually got shot down, of course. And the way that they did that is by putting reinforcement in the areas where there was most red. Now, an individual looking at this problem would probably think that that's a pretty reasonable conclusion to reach, right? The aircraft that returned were prone to enemy fire in the areas that you see the red dots. But the argument here is that the data set is totally and completely incomplete. We're only looking at aircrafts that returned back from battle, not the ones that were shot down when they were in battle. So an individual might reach the conclusion that that conclusion was a good conclusion. However, it's the wrong conclusion. And I think this is a really good display of how you can empower your people within an organization to make the right decisions. And that, of course, is a critical thinking exercise, but also comes into play with data literacy and how you consider the information that's provided. Are there biases associated to it? Is the data set complete? And so on and so forth. So we urge all companies to be the ones that make the right decision. I know you're not necessarily saving lives in that instance, but to make the right decision and not the wrong decision through not investing in this much needed skill of data literacy. Anu, back to you.
Thank you, Mark. Good time for me to introduce Sinead. So as part of my role, I am the professional services account manager here at Kubicle. And I've been working very closely with PwC and of course, PwC Ireland, that are our local counterparts just next door. And I would love to give Sinead a warm welcome. Sinead is a senior manager within PwC Ireland for digital transformation. And we are going to be talking a little bit about the do's and the don'ts and the best practices of implementing a data literacy program. Sinead, welcome.
Thank you.
How are you and how have things been?
I'm good. Yeah, thank you for having me to talk about one of my favorite topics. We've had quite an interesting journey at PwC over the last number of years. Obviously, COVID has kind of spiraled or really spurted on digital acceleration and digital transformation for many organizations. But now we're really seeing, the dust settle and how that continues on in organizations and what organizations are doing, including ourselves, to make sure that that journey hasn't stopped, but that we're still going.
As an L&D person, do you feel like you have to constantly upskill yourself and stay on top of all things tech? Because I saw you posted your certificates even last evening, and because we've been working so closely, I see you're almost having to constantly upskill and get certified and all of these fancy tools and tech that come your way. What do you think about that?
Yeah, so the thinking that, you're done in university or you're done with your education and then that's it is very much a thing of the past. There's this whole belief now that your digital mindset or your mindset, having a growth mindset, especially when it comes to all things digital, is actually really important. By that I mean that we're continuously learning. Our days in the classroom are never just done, and using something like Kubicle is a great way for people to kind of take control of that themselves. So at PwC, we've driven our digital upskilling by using Kubicle is one of the ways. And that certainly, yes, that was business led. But what's been really nice about that is it's very much personal journey, and Kubicle allows our people to kind of take that on themselves. And obviously then there's that lovely little reward of putting your cert up on your LinkedIn, once you've completed something. Personally, I've done it myself. I found it very useful returning to work after, for example, maternity leave, or I was speaking to someone yesterday who returned to work from a sabbatical of 3 months traveling, and going, so much has changed in that short space of time. How do I get up to speed? And being able to just challenge yourself by doing a Kubicle course or something like that is a really good way to do it.
Yeah, that's an interesting one, right? Because I remember before you were going away on mat leave, we were talking about the metaverse, and that was the big hot topic. And then you came back, and we've been talking about AI for the last, I think, 4 or 5 months, almost nonstop. So the change in technologies is almost constant. Do you find it challenging to see data literacy strategy as a constant moving target?
It certainly is. No, it's definitely challenging in many ways, because it is a bit of a moving target. Yeah. There's so much changing. Like, I don't think this time last year there was no mention of ChatGPT or generative AI, and now it's everywhere. So with that, we just need to make sure that we keep our values in the right place. So, for example, having a culture of continuous learning, encouraging people to always upskill and the little bit by bit as they go along, it's really important. So from our graduates coming in the door and even new hires and that, we really encourage that, and trying to embed, we obviously have what you think of as the usual business skills and the business IQ that our professionals and our people do, but also that the digital IQ is really important now as well.
Yeah. And that actually brings me back to, kind of nailing down on the best practices that I have on screen here. And Just a big fan of how PwC globally, not just in Ireland, are building a learning culture, like you said. And executive sponsorship or leadership buy-in is a big part of that. Do you want to tell us a little bit about how that's baked into, I guess, your organizational structure and, strategy at a network level or at a line of service level?
Sure, yeah. So for those not so familiar with PwC, we are quite a large international organization. We are in hundreds of, I think it's about almost 300,000 employees across the globe, and basically offices in every country. So often there are strategy is mandated centrally, and it's pushed out globally. So digital strategy is one of that. However, it is down to each individual territory or country how they interpret that. So for example, PwC Ireland, we have just over 3,000 people working here. Our leadership team, so 4 years ago, made a very strong statement by appointing a head of digital and saying, right, we're appointing someone in a very senior position. It was a very well regarded and well established partner that they've appointed in the role. And with that, then they were the person mandated to drive the digital agenda at PwC Ireland. The chief digital officer was then appointed a team around him. So there was a team at the moment. Our team kind of fluctuates. So at the moment, I think we're about 20, but we've gone up as far as 35, 40, and then we grow and shrink. As we bring people on and people roll on to other maybe client-facing projects. But that was a really big statement to say, look, we're quite serious about this. Our leadership are really, really committed, and that did by committed. I'd say they were doing their digital upskilling. They were attending what we had called digital academies, supporting digital champions in the business by, carving out time for their own people to actually upskill, but then also innovate and play around with the tools to try and come up with business solutions with them.
Yeah, and interesting, you use the word digital champions, and that's one of the key words that we use internally within Kubicle as well. And that's just to do with creating sort of agents of change or, people that are really driving or being change agents within an organization for data literacy. And in line with that, PwC do their digital accelerator program, right? So do you want to share a little bit about, what that program is about and how that maps to, your core tools and learning objectives? And truly just celebrates and identifies these avengers of digital champions or digital literacy within a business.
Sure, Anu. It's actually really timely because we have a new wave, our Wave 5 digital accelerator start next week. So these are, I think, about 15 individuals from across the business, different grades, different skill sets. They've all kinds of
we call them Avengers in Kubicle.
Yeah,
like they're almost like, an interesting parallel because all of them would even specialize towards a specific skill, right? It could be data wrangling, data prep, but they are the superheroes of the organization.
That's exactly it. So they basically I just set it up yesterday evening. Is what my last task I did before I finished yesterday evening was their Kubicle semesters. So we have quite an extensive Kubicle curriculum that they will go through. Some of them have been done bits and pieces already through their own teams, but they will carve out the time to go through that. They will then start working on solutions as well, and they will become a central point person and in their own teams. But they also have that network amongst themselves to share and collaborate on creating digital solutions. Also, in a learning environment, it gives them not only the time but also the opportunity to meet with other people across the business and other things as well. So the digital accelerators are they're protected time, and that support from leadership to push out those digital accelerators and encourage them and give them kind of a place in their teams and across the business has been super important there. We appreciate that not everyone is a digital accelerator, we all can't be digital accelerators. So they're a great support to the people who don't maybe have the same appetite, but they still are going through, doing their Kubicle training and stuff like that. So we've accepted that, there's different levels of interest and ability and skills and that there. So we're just allowing for that.
Yeah, that's such a big kudos and shout out, I guess, to PwC, because really, if you think about it, learning in general is an opportunity cost of time within professional services, because every hour you're spending Learning is
Yeah.
time that you could be spending billable hours doing work. But then it's, I guess it takes organizational culture and a long-term perspective to understand that how that can translate into efficiency and staying relevant and staying robust. On that note, it's so important, again, within learning to feed that back in terms of results, measuring results, kind of signaling or showcasing what you're doing back to the leadership or even externally. So how do you do that? Do you have any recommendations on doing that well?
Yeah, and it's not often like the results aren't evident right away. It takes a bit of time as well, because what the time invested into digital upskilling and that data literacy piece, then it takes some time for that to be processed and then translate into solutions. So we have ways of measuring the digital solutions and that our teams have created. We do also track the training in that. So embedding, things like Kubicle and digital upskilling into core trainings, that's been really, really important. And looking at the number of people who are certified in things like Alteryx, Power BI, and other tools, that's really, really important to us as well. But also looking at things like tool usage and then the amount of dashboards created or workflows created and all that kind of thing. Obviously, then you could go on to look at other things like time saved or the impact that they've made on a specific project or with a client and that. So there's many different ways. But what has been really, really great is the lovely stories coming out of it, be it from the clients' teams or internally, or seeing, seeing the reverse mentoring that's actually happening now, because we might have a junior member of staff going out to a client with a very senior, well-tenured colleague, and they're the ones presenting a dashboard to a client and getting that face time, getting that time with the face time with their own leaders, but also with others. Like that's been really a big, that's been a big culture shift as well, and seeing that actually, skills can come in all shapes and sizes and from different parts of the place.
Yeah, no, that's what I think makes the collective network effect within a matrixed organization like PwC as well. On the graduate training, it's the season, right? Like you must be prepping for your grad training. There's loads of that happening. What are the main, I guess, things that you do to prepare yourselves internally as a team? What are the best practices around building a brilliant grad training or foundational training program?
Yeah, so as part of the digital transformation team, we didn't really want to reinvent the wheel here. So what we've done is we've partnered with the grad recruitment, with the grad teams across PwC, and talk to them about the training and the onboarding and stuff that they do with the new grads when they come in. And there's a lot of shiny shoes and young fresh faces around the place today, because they've all just recently started. So we now have Kubicle embedded in the core trainings for new joiners when they start. We have something called core training. Is they start core 1, core 2, core 3 as they progress through the years in PwC. By the time they're kind of coming up to that about to come into manager level, they've spent 2, 3, 4 years using digital tools and actually upskilling in digital tools. So they've built in that culture of training, which is super, super important. It's become the norm. Unlike, those of us who join as experienced hires, so at manager or senior manager grade, we're not quite as in tune with that mindset, and we really need to put a bit more work into it. But it's really good seeing that coming from the younger grades and starting it from fresh. So we're seeing the new joiners really, really embracing the likes of Kubicle and that reward that I'm doing this for myself, but I'm also doing it for others. Also, for example, the Gen AI content that came into Kubicle in recent months, we had another chat with our colleagues who are preparing for the new graduates and saying, look, we have there's about 6 hours of this that we recommend that you put into the curriculum, and that's been put in as well. And so it's constantly, maybe reviewing and changing it, but we have the basis there.
Yeah, so like what I'm hearing you say is, again, obviously to tailor that down to an intern or a grad level, but also staying agile and quick to, issue if you need to do Gen AI training? How do we quickly issue guidelines around this? How can we quickly deploy training and offer people, e-learning licenses, for example, like Kubicle, or, give them any necessary kind of crutches and resources that they might need? Just aware of time, Sinead, we chat almost every week and I'd love to keep chatting. We have 5 minutes left. So I'm going to take a few questions that we have in the Q&A panel here, and maybe we can answer them for people. And guys, if there's any questions that you'd like to send or ask Sinead or myself, feel free to pop them in the chat here. I'm going to start with one which is jumping out to me here, which is, if you could suggest one key area to learn about in the digital data area, what would it be and why? And this is an interesting question because a lot of people would answer this in the form of a technology or a tool, but I see that in PwC, it's always learning objective. So instead of saying Alteryx, you would say data wrangling or data preparation. So do you want to take that, Sinead? Because I know your data strategy anyway, but I'll let you answer that. What would be your favorite key area to sort of learn on?
I'm gonna say Alteryx, but also that whole thing of data wrangling, figuring out how to manage data. Data is so precious to us all now. And there's some interesting figures, and I can't remember off the top of my head, that all these organizations are collecting and processing data, but we don't actually do much with it. We need to get better at that. And as we're seeing, it's becoming more and more of a thing. So definitely learning how to slice and dice data, how to manage it better, the data wrangling piece. Wrangling, makes me think of a cowboy, but that's exactly it, really. That would be a really, really important one. In terms of then the next step after that is the visualization. So data visualization and being able to tell a story with the data. It's amazing how a visualization can actually tell a very impactful story. But what I would say there is, proceed with caution. You can also maybe tell the wrong story. So actually understanding the principles around data visualization and telling a story with data is really, really important too.
Yeah, because we saw that in practice, and this is just for our viewers. PwC Ireland have built a dashboard to analyze their license consumption and their license distribution within the organization. So not only learning the actual data visualization, but putting that into practice in your day-to-day use, and that would be a usage for yourself in L&D, where we not imagine people using Power BI in the usual. You guys have gone and built a Power BI dashboard. So I think that's a very excellent example. Another question here, and maybe I can take that one. Data is important, but not all data is important. So how is data literacy taking into account the ability to understand what quality data is rather than understand all data? Great question. Yes, we talked throughout the webinar about how loads of data is available, but I think it takes a certain level of foundational data and analytics understanding and also data preparation, right? So how do you prepare the data and take what is important involves? So if you go to the Kubicle library and if you wanted to understand how that relates back to training a little bit better, we train on data strategy and governance. So that comes from the strategic apex of what is the data that you're kind of decentralizing and giving into the organization, and make sure it's relevant from a strategic level. But then when it comes down to an individual training needs perspective, making sure that you're preparing data properly, that you're wrangling it properly before you actually get into deeply, analyzing it or feeding it into an Alteryx or something like that. Trying to see any other questions. What group would you suggest identifying first? High code, low code, no code groups. Also, what would you say about prepping the company to begin doing more data governance? Again, this is in line with what I just said. It goes back to, and Sinead, maybe you want to give a little bit of example about how you have partner training and leadership training in place, right? Like there are certain Kubicle courses that we've recommended to partners before around data strategy and governance. Do you want to maybe give a little bit of advice around leadership training in per se?
Yeah, it's worth recognizing that, not all people can be, painted with the same brush, that we come from different places and different skill sets. And with that, our leadership is certainly one cohort that we are focusing on. They need to be part of the training as well if we want to make an impact. Leadership training is slightly different in that they're maybe not as hands-on and getting stuck in, but it's really important that leadership know how to review, that they know how to look at what the work that their people have done in terms of maybe a workflow or a dashboard or something, and know how to review it and actually then analyze. So that's really, really important to us. Also, leadership need to know what's coming next. What's next down the tracks? What are we going to be doing next with the next technology that's happening? What does this mean for me as a leader? What does it mean for my team? All that kind of thing. So it's the principles and the context, but also having a certain amount of the skills. Now, we have actually made sure that all our partners, all 150 odd of them, have gone through digital academies and digital upskilling. It's been really, really important. And actually, we made them do a pledge even back when we started the program to get their commitment to this. So it's been a big deal for us. And 4 years later, it's still as important as it was, back then. So it is a big thing.
Well, thank you so much, Sinead. Just going to thank you very, very much for sharing some amazing learnings and amazing nuggets from your experience at PwC. Wish you all the very best with the Gen AI wave and all of the other learning things that are in plan for the next calendar year. And for all of the questions that we haven't answered, we will be following up with a written answer to your questions. Or feel free to email me directly on abishan@kubicle.com if you have any questions around the presentation, or if you would be interested in finding out more about digital upskilling. But thanks very much, Sinead. And thank you, Mark, as well, for joining us. And thank you, everybody who made the time to attend the webinar as well. Wish you all a very, very good week and happy learning.